How can we really understand what's happening inside the Ukrainian army? How do soldiers feel? What challenges do they face? What parts of military life do they believe aren't working? Traditional sociology doesn't always provide the answers, but another discipline, anthropology, also called ethnography, offers a different approach. This method involves deep immersion into the everyday lives of soldiers. A more recent innovation called mobile ethnography takes this further, allowing researchers to stay connected with soldiers even when they're not physically present. We wanted to learn more about what such a deep dive can reveal about the Ukrainian army. You're listening to the Explaining Ukraine podcast. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. I'm a Ukrainian philosopher, editor-in-chief of UkraineWorld, and president of PEN Ukraine. My guest today is Oleksiy Moskalenko, an analyst at the Initiative Center of Come Back Alive, Povernys, zhyvym, one of Ukraine's most prominent charitable foundations supporting the military and veterans since 2014. Explaining Ukraine is produced by UkraineWorld, an English-language media project about Ukraine run by Internews Ukraine. Before we begin, a quick reminder, you can support our work on Patreon. Your contributions are essential as we rely heavily on crowdfunding. You can also help fund our volunteer trips to frontline areas in Ukraine, where we support both soldiers and civilians. Donations are welcome via PayPal. All links are in the episode description. So let's begin. Oleksiy Moskalenko, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you.
We are going to talk about very interesting things because from the first glance, what you do is called mobile ethnography in the Ukrainian army, and it sounds very unclear what it is. But let us start from a different angle. What if I tell you that you are trying to understand what is really happening in the Ukrainian army on the level of everyday life, but using the modern methodology of science that we are calling anthropology or ethnography? Is it correct?
Yes, I would say so. With the limitations that it takes, but yes.
You're representing the foundation, very famous Ukrainian foundation, Come Back Alive, which Ukrainians know for being one of the best Ukrainian foundations for helping the army. And basically what Ukrainians know is that Come Back Alive gets lots of donations from the Ukrainian citizens to help the army with equipment, with everything. But what is lesser known, it's about studies that the foundation is making, and you're representing one of those fields, one of those directions of intellectual work with the army. Why the foundation decided to go deeper into what's happening in the army? What did you try to understand?
Well, I'm part of the Initiative Center. It's an NGO that is part of the big family of Come Back Alive. So we are only doing think tank work to analyze some of the processes, and mostly it's the request from the government to dive deep into some aspects of it. And by helping the army directly, the foundation realized that it's probably limited to how much impact you can make. So in order to make more strategic, more long-term solutions, you have to dig deeper into the problems. And this is what we started to look at, is the training, is the education, and some of more systematic things that must be improved in order for us to sustain war of attrition or any long-term challenges.
What is this mobile ethnography? How do you describe the methodology?
So this is the limited way to do the ethnography, but it's not so limited when you look into the data that you can get with the help of mobile phone. Since mobile phones are always present with us, we can see, or we can share, we can be those recipients of the information that, for instance, soldiers can send us, because we can also look at the social media posts they see, for instance. We can also hear their thoughts, what they can tell us. But it's not only in text, or it actually can be audio. So we can also catch the mood, For instance, one of the recruits we've engaged with at the first stage, I said so can you explain like how is it now? So we have to study the subjective perspective of what person feels. So he said nothing actually happens here. It's like he was there for a few days, so it's like he got used to it a little bit. But because it was a voice message, I heard how bad was his voice. I was like, okay, but what about your voice? And he's like, I'm so sick. I'm like, so tell us about your sickness. Where did you get it? Are you being cured? So this is something that he didn't even realize. But because of the voice, we could start this conversation from the point of view of the healthcare. And this is one of the biggest outcomes of the research we've done, that the healthcare must be improved.
So just to tell our audience, ethnography here doesn't mean that you are studying ethnicity or ethnic dances in the army or the ethnic costumes. And this is the field that on the continent, European continent, people rather call it anthropology, and this is an attempt to describe and understand the way how a certain community lives, but in a very deep way. It's what one of the famous anthropologists / ethnographers called thick description. So it's deeper than sociology, right? It's basically not surveying, not questioning. It's an attempt to go very deep into the everyday life of people to understand what is going on.
Yes, thank you. So basically people can say a fraction of what is happening. They can only describe it with their language. So if we use our source of information to language, it severely limits us. So we need to understand, first of all, what other things that are happening, like the mood. Sometimes people react to things in a certain way without even describing it properly. So we're like, why was that happening? And mobile ethnography helps us to engage on a long term basis. So it's not in-depth interview where it's 1 or 2 hour limited conversation where you can only turn left or right to a limited extent. But we can say okay, you go there, let's go there. Like if you talk about health, let's just talk about health. And there is no limit. Only the time is limit to how much of his or her time can be given to this specific chat. And this is and also we grasp the thoughts in that specific moment. This is where, if we, for instance, he was sick, but we arranged an interview in 1 week, there will be so many things happening to his life in this time that he will forget about this sickness. But at that specific moment, it was so important that it prevented him from being trained. It prevented him from being, motivated. And it was probably the reason why he went ill. He ran away. So it was something that is so important at the specific moment, and this method helps us to understand the sequence of these moments where person feels something or has a reflection. And this is why it's
I finally recall the name of that anthropologist with thick description. It's Clifford Geertz. So normally what people think about ethnography / anthropology is that there is a scientist that goes into the community and lives with the community for quite a big amount of time. It can be months, it can be years. You are using a little bit different methodology, and therefore it's called mobile, because you're using the basically communication with the soldiers through the mobile phones. Is that correct? And can you describe it?
Yeah. So ideally, it would take me as an outsider. I must be an outsider. I must be exposed to new things to me. If I'm a soldier, and if I go back to study soldiers, I will miss so many things because I was already I became part of the community, part of the culture. So it has to be someone with the outside perspective, but with a deep understanding of, for instance, language. I need to grasp the nuances of the language that they speak or some interactions that happen. So this is a balance that needs to be struck at the first place. But at the same time, mobile ethnography is like it's in the golden middle of what can be done in terms of the time, in terms of the budgets often, but also it gives this kind of another perspective that if you do the proper ethnography, the original ethnography, you have to live with two people, it's just one family that you study. With mobile ethnography, you can simultaneously study 6 families. So it gives you a limited exposure to their lives, but at the same time, it gives you a comparative analysis where you can spot the patterns straight away. So there is a compromise, but at the same time, the data is rich enough for you to make assumptions, make conclusions, make even recommendations.
So what you're asking soldiers to, what kind of information and how exactly do they communicate? Do they communicate through voice messages? Do they communicate through the screenshots, through the photographs, through videos? What exactly?
It all depends on how digital savory is a person. Sometimes it's actually quite a broad range of the things that you described. Sometimes it's only texts. One of the respondents, he was making himself a diary, and then he was like copy pasting that text, like day 7, and he gave me this description. I could, and what is good about it, that I didn't get it at the end, this data, 35 days of training in one block. I could analyze it on the daily basis and question, ask like more specific questions about some of the things, and it gave me first of all what understanding of what he means by saying some certain things. This is how we digged into Sovietness. Like people say it's Soviet, so what does it mean Soviet? Like because people have different interpretation of what is Soviet and why it is so bad, and also it gave us some also a little bit more understanding of how this perspective of his is being shaped, like why he says so. And we try to understand from the perspective of his motivation, of his mood, of his understanding of how much sense it makes to be there. So it's quite a critical things they capture for themselves, and they share with us like, this thing demotivates me because of this. So they don't question the general situation because it's given in our context, but they do say like, why are we doing this? Why is it like that? And this thing, and because it's 35 days of these reflections, it gives like I lived life of 7 to 10 people of like their interaction. So I feel like I have more rich data than it would be me spending their time. Myself.
So it also shows the openness of the Ukrainian army, because you are not part of the Ukrainian army, you are part of the civic foundation, an NGO, and it is an NGO with a very big reputation, of course, and the army trusts this NGO because it helped so much. But at the same time, you're an outsider, you're a civilian, and the army could say, but look, I'm not sure what exactly the soldiers will tell you, and maybe it will be used for enemy propaganda, and maybe people will share some secret information. So is it an indicator for you that the army is open? And if it's open, why is it open?
Yes, we underestimate how open is the army and even Ukraine to process to changes, and we sometimes don't give enough credit for ourselves for actually in this time doing so much change. That's like what struck me, and I didn't know it before I was doing these researches. So definitely we should be aware of how limited this space is. Any army in the world, like I haven't heard of any such research in any other army, especially with the help of an outsider, because of the data, because of sensitivity, but because we have this kind of weird dynamic between civil society and the government, when sometimes civil society is as long as like it stands there, as like they have the same institutional history as the government is. So it's kind of unique to the Western world. Let's
very, very often bigger institutional.
Oh yeah, sometimes it's the carrier of the institutional
durability, because government is changing and some people are in the field for decades.
Yeah.
Look, you gave me the study. Unfortunately, I haven't yet read it. Which is called How a Civilian Person Becomes a Military, which you co-authored with Serhiy Bahlai and Anton Muraveynik from basically the Come Back Alive Foundation. And
Center of Initiatives.
Yes.
Initiative Center, yeah.
And tell me, I think this is one thing that very little people understand around the world, that's probably one of the key problems, because Ukrainian army is not an army of professional military. Of course, there are professional militaries, but they are probably a minority, a big minority. Ukrainian army currently is mostly people who were civilians just a few years ago or a few months ago, and I know that for many international foundations that are working with the army, the key question is how to turn a military back into a civilian, how to adapt a veteran back into the civilian life. Whereas, of course, for Ukraine, it's a very big problem as well, because people go from the army, and many often there are people with amputations, with the health problems, wounded, etc. But there is another problem, and it's as big, is how to make a civilian into a military, because on this depends our survival. So what for you after your study, what are the biggest challenges? Because I assume they're probably not on the level of motivation, and probably even not on the level of kind of a professional training, but probably on some other levels, on the levels of everyday life, on the levels of comfort, on the level of being away from your home. What are exactly the problems?
First of all, I just remember how I felt in 2022 when all those civilians who became military soldiers, they became invisible to international organizations. Because if a soldier dies, like most of the world doesn't care, because it's a soldier. It's like his job. It was his will to go there. But this is not the truth here. And it's
like people are saying, okay, the Russians are bombing the civilian infrastructure. Civilians, of course, it's very bad. But when Russians are killing a soldier who was a civilian 1 week ago,
he's a civilian, and all the soldiers are civilians for us in our mind. And this was like always like strike me, because 2 civilians died, but what about soldiers who died? they are like fathers, brothers, friends of ours, or mothers. And why are we talking about that? And actually, that's what deeply demotivated me to work in the international development sector, because this is where it's a zone where that it doesn't exist, because it seems to be like those soldiers are volunteers. They went to kill. If they die, it's what they were ready for.
It's their choice.
Yeah, it's their choice. Sadly, our reality and our context doesn't give you the choice, and also doesn't give you even like a space to turn from soldier to civilian, because there might be a case where he will or she will be mobilized again. So this is like it's a context that we live in, sadly. And what can you do? And so of course people outside don't understand that complexity and that tragedy probably that is exposed to, like people are exposed here to. So what my personal journey tells me that the more and probably what I see from the people I worked with, I studied, is that not knowing is a big problem, because the more you know, the more predictable the process becomes, and the less you fear, and the less it becomes built and like filled with a lot of kind of suspicions and counter-propaganda messages and so on. So actually, I'm surprised to see how myself I calm down by knowing what happens to veterans, what happens, like what's the journey, what are the perspectives, and by knowing you can prepare yourself. You can actually not only prepare yourself, but you can build the ecosystem of preparedness for yourself. For any change that you make, and it's kind of like risk management called in the West, and it's what you can do too when you know stuff. And this is probably our research this is why our research is helpful to the civilians too. Like Army knows what to do now, like with some data evidence, because they knew before, but they have like extra evidence to support some of the statements, like healthcare must be improved. But at the same time, civilians, they might be much more aware of the processes of how you ensure your rights, how you protect yourself better, how you prepare yourself better, how you you can always have a choice. It's interesting how military, like if you talk to generals, they say this is like it's a rigid force where there is no choice. But all humans always have choice. They can run away. They can change the divisions. They can there is always like, we don't underestimate how much freedom is within the human, even if he or she is a part of such a structure as the army. So we need still to do this balance act of, is that person motivated? Is he feeling well? Is he, balancing well? Because this is a journey that has no joy, mostly. So it's like we would be lying to ourselves. We say like how to make motivated serves, because it's like nobody enjoys it to serve and to give you freedom to exchange to huge risks to your life. We talked to one of the instructors. He said like, how can I be happy? I'm, my students are dying. Like what aspect of my work as an instructor can be motivating? I'm doing it because I have to do, and I know I can do it well. And this is the thing that keeps me up. But it's also it's a consciously traumatizing experience to be a good or even be an instructor.
Yeah, I think the the kind of set of values that are normal for peaceful societies, like you have to be happy, you have to enjoy your life, you have to be comfortable.
Work-life balance.
Yeah, work-life balance is just so secondary, because the key questions, even the question of freedoms, like I think people understand that there is a deeper sense of freedom, which is strangely enough very connected to duty, but I think the concept of dignity is much more important than freedom. You mentioned that many of people that came through your research say that the army is still very Soviet. And we have this word for this, which is called Sovok. What exactly do they mean, and how really the problem is with that? Because I assume that by Soviet they understand precisely what you're saying. It's not giving freedom when it can be done, not thinking how to solve problems, and maybe some top-down level of communication where soldiers are treated as just objects that are going to die and not as human beings.
Well, my perception is that it's mostly about attitude with which people are treated. As in Soviet Union, if you didn't possess some power, you are nobody. And this is how you like instantly, and even people who are young and never lived in the Soviet Union, they still call it Soviet. So it's a story that is being retold, and then like, oh, this is Soviet. And so probably even there was no such thing in Soviet time because they haven't experienced it firsthand. So it was interesting how just people started to associate bad processes, bad attitude with the inefficiency, with the Sovietness. So this is like, it's Soviet, Soviet. And this is like becomes now, when enough people call Soviet, people say like, I will not do that because it's Soviet. But actually, and this is why I wrote this article a few weeks ago, that, I try to decompose, to deconstruct what this Sovietness is. So if you want to get rid of the Sovietness in the army, it's actually consists of pretty solid things to tackle. Let's say marks. So because of the current situation, everyone who is being trained, and he's in a more or less good health condition, she will be serving in the army in the front line, or like in the brigade. In the process you're given marks. So recruits feel that these marks aren't for nobody. So this is like something that from Soviet times, where for reporting you do something, but it doesn't mean anything. So actually, it just takes away your time.
You cannot have a golden medal for being trained, right? Like in school.
Yeah. So it's like this meaningless activities that nobody needs unless it's for reporting. So it's for someone to give someone, especially in the documents. So this like papers are still very important. So you can sometimes training process is still judged by the papers. So it's not about the real training, but actually how well the documents are filled. This is what the inspection sometimes checks. Of course they see it, or sometimes it's some of the processes like informing, because. Again, one of the instructors we've interviewed different types of servicemen. They said in Germany it was actually amazing. Before I went there, I was even told if I can bring a pet. So it's that detail of that level of detailization of the information provided to me. In Soviet Union, why would I explain it to you? Like your details, your rights, because you're just, who asks you? So this is kind of. It instantly brings the memory of what you've been told about Soviet Union, even for young people. Of course, for those who experienced Soviet Union, of course, they can say was more evidence, but it's very subjective. It's not so much about Soviet Union, to be honest. It's more what we think of.
But what word do they use? Do they use Sovok? Okay.
Sovok, yeah.
Radyanщина.
Sovok.
Does it also mean some level of inefficiency of organization, of management? Does it also mean that, I imagine when a civilian comes, when he's in 20s and 30s, this is a person who is, who is probably used to feeling freedom, personal freedom to do this, to do that, to use your time, etc. And of course, in the army, you feel lack of this freedom. Is this also called Radyanshina?
Yes. Your commanders or anyone in the leadership doesn't care, or it's for the sake of the documents. So it's not the real. It's not the real process. It's like it's something to be on the paper. So and also what one of the recruits said, like he came back from Italy because two of our respondents, they without knowing, they went to one went to Italy, one went to the UK. So we actually happened to watch them, observe them being trained in two countries. And this guy who was trained in Italy, he came back and he was like, I'm so shocked because he spent some time more in training center in Ukraine. He was like, the thing that shocks me is that nobody cares, and this is what is so depressing to me. Like I see guys like putting a finger on this. I forgot how to say it, like a kurok. So something that is unacceptable, but because nobody cares from the leadership, so it's like everyone is walking like with their hand like unsafe, was their weapon unsafe. It struck him in comparison to Italian experience.
It's interesting because it means that it's not about discipline, right? So they would probably understand discipline because discipline means that you should be very, very strict on those things. But it's precisely this lack of care. Yeah, that
causes this discipline fall. Yeah, probably this is why they explain it, because the discipline doesn't fall itself by itself. So basically you're right. It's about discipline. But why is it discipline is not happening? And one of the other respondents actually said, like, I'm surprised how lack of enforcement is here. Like there is no punishment for something. So it's also about lack of care, right? Because it's like, why would you explain this kind of chaos in some of the processes?
So in probably the Russian army punishes for everything and punishes with very cruelly. And we talk a lot about this cruelty of the Russian army. And probably Ukrainians need to be more disciplined in this sense.
I don't know about Russian army, but definitely the discipline is some of the things that is missing overall in the society. I would say comparatively, especially in such a case as a war. I've talked to foreign anthropologists who are studying here. They say like, it's actually like it's extremely. It's like, probably it's one of the things that is also making us resilient, this chaos of processes, of attitudes. Like there's so much diversity that you cannot tackle one of the systems because there's so many systems within this.
Yeah, it's very anarchic.
Yeah.
Ukraine continues to be very anarchic. Interestingly, that probably the Sovietness is also part of this anarchic.
It's one of the groups.
One of the groups of this anarchic system. But tell me, okay, we spoke a little bit about the problems, but do they also share like wow things like, I'm so happy to have this experience and that experience?
And this is where we are not unique. It's this bonding experience with the instructor, with the rest of the guys. Yes, it's very motivating to be part of the army if you look at this interpersonal perspective, if you look at the respect in the society that you get, and there are rewarding parts of it. So of course they, for many of them, this is just like we they're trying to make a balance, like what I get from this in terms of the intrinsic things like respect for myself, like respect from the others, but also the friendships that we form. It's extremely rewarding.
Do you track changes? Because we talked about these problems of Sovietness, but many people also say how army is changing because this Sovietness remains as a kind of inertia, but it's also lots of these internal changes. And I assume that one of the key changes that is happening and should be happening is precisely the respect of the commanders to soldiers, caring about human beings and about what they think, what they feel. What do you say?
I do not know. But I'm definitely seeing some evidence that the shift is happening. In the general stuff, we've heard the word care for recruit 1 year ago. So definitely it becomes like, no, we actually, and looking at how brigades fight for each of the new recruits. So it's a competition now. It's like we have to attract We will provide you with the good ammunition. We will provide you with good training. We treat you like a human. This is what we can see on the advertisement poster. So these are the evidence that actually the army is changing. And actually, if even some brigades are doing that, the other brigades are learning, because they are missing people if they do the old style. So of course they have to why are they advertising recruitment with the help of like humane attitude? Like, what does it mean? Should we do that too? So probably this kind of change is happening, like even on the level that we don't see.
It's interesting because the strength of the Russian army is precisely the neglect of the human being, right? And we know all this, cannon flash attacks, and we know that the Russians do not care about their soldiers, and we know that they do not bury their soldiers, and we know the stories from many parts of the front line that they just burn their dead in a crematorium. They don't care. Whereas Ukrainian attitude to life is different, right? We see a kind of cult of the dead soldiers and absolutely different. But it's also on the level not of ethics but pragmatics, because we will survive only when we will be able to get more people into the army, and we will be able to get more people into the army when people will be respected in the army. Do you agree?
Yeah, but at the same time, it gives us the disadvantage, because we have to take care of the lives, like we respect life much more. So of course there is more even defense of people who are getting mobilized, and we can see this on the streets, these tensions on the streets, that some people are against it, some people are they're neutral. So of course this also makes our defense much harder. In Russia they would question it much less. Just because of the tradition, the attitude to life, the culture of death, I would say.
And the sheer number of the people about whom nobody cares, right?
Yeah, that's true. Or sometimes it's even like a family. Does your family encourage you to go, or does your family keep you from going? Because we heard a lot of stories where Russian families encourage them to go because you will earn money.
Yeah, it's all about money.
And it's mostly, I don't know, we cannot compare it because it's like quantitative, and we didn't do the researches in both countries or even here. But it feels like here your net, your circles will protect you, will guard you, and you have to actually break like your first will to your fear, but at the same time you have to convince everyone around you, or like be bold enough to ignore those fears to go to the army. So it's like we have even like extra layers of
people will pay a lot of money here not to go to the army, to save the lives and of your sons and daughters. Yeah, it exists. Yeah, there are different attitudes to life, definitely, in Ukraine and Russia. Tell me about you. You told me a little bit about your people you studied who went abroad, and it's also interesting, right? The cultures are different, but at the same time, we understand that in the NATO countries, people can probably respect soldier more, but they just don't know how to fight. And I heard a lot of stories when Ukrainians would be coming to the NATO trainings and will end up in teaching the NATO people how to wage a modern war. What do you say?
Yes, this is where we are not actually most respectful of life too, because we can see how much respect you can get when you are in Western Europe, for instance, or even like in Eastern Europe. You see this tremendous lift of human life, like the value of it. But again, it's a social protocol that is yet to be tested. In some of the countries, it's still a profession. Soldier is a profession. So you go there to build your career. Here, it's not a profession, it's a passion, or it's like, it's your duty. You don't want to go there. You wish to go back to your job that you loved, or even you had a small business. You were an operator of some machine. You don't want to be a soldier. You want to do your duty and come back. And this is where Western armies are yet to be challenged. Like, does your professional career path hold when there is so much attacks, so many casualties? Is it the model that will sustain? Like, so much respect to human life. Like, especially like one of the because we've done some extra research of like comparative research of the training processes here and there. And if you contract so much to the outside companies, like your army is supported by many civilian companies, will they run away if you're being invaded? Like, because all those companies, they have like corporate values, like your life is like precious. Like if one employee dies, like we just, like it's the risks we cannot take. It's not the case here. Like how many people from the Ukrainian railways died? Like the railways is still running. So this is like something that, if it was like some, I don't know, German railways, like first employee dies, like will the employees go on on duty the next day? We don't know. So this is like also like it's a sad place on this line of value to life where you need to stop in order to survive. I don't know. It's very like ethically challenging and it's problematic.
It's very, very interesting and hard philosophical question because you can say, the life is the highest value, but then there is a question of other lives as well. And for example, we've seen it in 2022 when all the diplomatic institutions, except for some exceptions, have left the country valuing the life of their employees, obviously, and it's very good. But this is precisely what makes so many other lives of Ukrainians into danger. And probably so many Ukrainians also died because the West didn't want to risk. Or if you take the protocols of the international humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross or some others that actually leave the war zone to protect the lives of their employees, but again, this exposes to risk other people.
Yes, this risk management is extremely ridiculous in some cases. Do you know that some embassies are prohibiting their staff to travel to the left bank of Kyiv? Like they cannot go there because it's the risk zone. So it's that to that extent over careful, and this is where, of course, it makes sense. But at the same time, like you can like I could make it ridiculous because I would say that you can choke at the restaurant, and this is like so you don't eat. Like where is the life? Like left bank really is this where like the life ends? So like why?
I can tell you even more that still. Some of the embassies cannot fund the arrival of their citizens even to Uzhgorod, even to cross the border.
Too risky,
to cross the border, too risky. And even in some of the universities, you cannot, European universities, Western European universities, you cannot get a scholarship to come to Ukraine. And you need to go to Poland, and then you need to go on private. This is so ridiculous. But
and people have to risk. They have to stress, and of course they go uninsured or some I don't know. So basically, you expose them to you nudge them into extra risk because you don't cover the basic risks that could be covered. The thing I wanted to say is that it's also like I feel that. For many, it's not only like you defend group at the expense of risking your life, but also it's you are defending the future, the history of our planet for the rest of your life too. What the planet would look like if I'm not protecting this rule of law or like the world order that we lived in. If Europe is ruled by Russia or influenced by Russia, like is it the Europe that I want to live? And this is so many questions that become like a part of your decision-making process if you're Ukrainian civilian that probably like people in the West don't even know. That actually is like you have so many layers of like this personal conflicts. Yes, I value my personal life. Yes, I value the life of my family who cares for me. I know people, I know mothers who died because they stressed over their sons who were in the army. So it's like you risk your loved ones just because you put some other levels of your values to a more important stage. So it's like, are you awarded for that? No. So it's still it becomes your part of your own decision. You become this kind of all the stakeholders in you like connect, and they're like, okay, this is where.
Well, the ethics of de-risking, of diminishing risks, actually produces more risks. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, very, again, difficult philosophical question. But let us come back to our topic and tell me, like, the armies now is full of former civilians, and then they bring their skills, they bring their knowledge. Sometimes they're, the cameraman who come from television are probably very good at, driving the drones. and the IT people for whom Ukraine is very famous for also produce a lot of innovation. How is army changing because of that? Because of influx of so many civilians?
We can definitely say that they are disrupting the order that existed there. So some of the processes, one of the guys I know, he said, I brought up, he's a digital saver guy, and he's like, why are we doing these tables? Like, we could do it completely different way. So it's his own, like, even one experience shows that in one place, army already, changed so much just because of one guy who said, like, shall we just do it this way? And it proved to be more efficient. So we cannot even understand how many of these small interactions are happening in the army and how much they contribute to the because of probably our inherited chaos in as a thinking, as a structure of the society. We cannot learn enough from these good cases. Why people from other departments haven't heard about this solution in that specific. So it's still a silo effect. And this is where probably only some of this innovation, some of these breakthrough solutions are becoming national or systematic. And this is what probably where the improvement should be happening too. How do we learn our lessons? What solutions work and should be mainstreamed. It's a good venue to look at from the strategic level.
I sometimes think, and what do you think, when these people come back to the civilian life, although I know that many soldiers are questioning that they will come back to civilian life, because of this history of this war, which doesn't seem to have an end. But I assume that they will become very successful. They might become very successful because army is so complicated now. It's such a complex organism where you need to be an IT genius. You need to be organizational genius. They actually can. The commanders of brigades can run big corporations in the civilian life because of the complexity of the whole situation. What do you think? Do you think that this war experience will actually create better prepared civilians for even challenges of the civilian life, or it's rather a trend that they will not be ready to embrace and enjoy the civilian life?
I would say still a lot of support is needed because you have shock. Returning to civilian life, and this is where this thing would not happen if because you have already a wounded body and you have a lot of problems. Even if you're not wounded, so many things are wrong with your body that you're already not very competitive on the job market, because you have disabilities, or let's say some diseases that you have, chronic diseases that you have to take care of, and it takes already some of your time because a few days a week you are spending in the hospital or on a treatment. So I guess this is where the state and the society overall needs to step in, especially in caring for the families of the soldiers and the veterans. So I would say that the thing you said will unlikely happen if we don't play a more active role in supporting the life of basically they come with enormous resources, with enormous capacities and knowledge, but they need a hand in this process.
What do you think our international partners can do to help better Ukrainian army in those things that you actually identify? Healthcare, maybe the organizational matrix, maybe the improvement of attitude, or again the helping veterans come back to civilian life.
It's a very good question. My major was anthropology of development, so how anthropology sees all of these development efforts and if they lead to good or to bad. Often we see in Ukraine that all those development projects, it's you want to do good something for someone, actually doesn't work at least, or sometimes it harms the processes. So I would be very careful to what the international donors can do if it was their decisions, because they don't understand the context, and often they look at the needs and they're we will pick these needs because they're most neutral, they're less risky, and we will control the process. It will unlikely work. So I would say that a lot of support is needed, even say, the infrastructure, the hospitals that are there, but also what can be done if these hospitals are run by mean doctors who are like overloaded with work and they are not friendly and they're not supportive. They just like if there is no parking space for your car near to the hospital where you go to be cured, like why is it not happening? Can the money be spent there? Yes, of course, but also this money needs to be directed with the changes in the mentality and this is our role mostly because the foreigners will not be able to do that. So we have to step in more actively in terms of like changing the mindset of the people, but also it will not happen with the help of the training by some expert from the West who will come like now be user friendly, like to be human centered. Like it will not work.
It will not work.
It's a much more difficult process and like so many barriers are there. This is where as an anthropologist, I'm very curious, like this bureaucrats or like a public hospital official, what are his barriers to become, serving, because he has a lot of pains or she has a lot of pains and like we have to take care of those and make them be interested in the better services. It's our role because it's a long-term project and there is no development or international organization project that is running like 15 years. They all like run 2 years in which half a year is like opening up the project, like planning and so on, then like rushing to deliver some deliverables as they call it, like conferences in that hall, like delivering some, I don't know, some eco flows, bringing some material equipment, and then half a year we report. So from those 2-3 years, there was only like half of the time the way could be more or less efficient, but this change doesn't happen in that time. So it has to be like the owner has to be in Ukraine, looking at this from the historical perspective, like look at being responsible for the delivery of this process. But also our state is changes so fast that you cannot have like official who is like there like following the whole process. So it's also our problem. So yeah, it's much.
Yeah, and the whole problem with this development perspective with regard to Ukraine is that everybody thinks of what will come after the war, like how we renew the country after the war. But what if this after the war doesn't happen very soon? And again, as we started our conversation, what if the key problem is not how to make military back into civilian, but how to make civilian more resistant and how to make civilian probably into a military?
I guess, yes. I guess that so much of capital and so much of support is locked in waiting for the war to end that actually like it harms like the thinking of the stakeholders because they're like, okay, when? While we don't know if the war will end. Like, why don't you unlock all of the resources that you have to actually make it happen? The war will end, and we are not sure yet. So it's like we're in a much more dangerous position than that many of the stakeholders outside think. Like the investment project, like what investment are you talking about if we don't know where the line stops?
And the question is not how to develop after the war, but how to develop during the war.
During the war, yeah. How to make like people say Ukrainian society is resilient. How resilient? Like are we on the edge? Like do you know like what's the reality? Like it's not given that Ukrainians are resilient. We've been resilient so far, but it doesn't mean that actually we will be resilient because there is a capacity that being used.
Thank you, Oleksiy Moskalenko. Thank you very much for this conversation. So. I hope you, our listeners, have heard that this is very empiric, that this is very deep, deep understanding how the army works and how people are living there, but also we ended up with very philosophical questions. Thank you very much. This was a podcast Explain Ukraine by UkraineWorld, an English language media outlet about Ukraine. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. I am a Ukrainian philosopher, editor-in-chief of UkraineWorld and president of PEN Ukraine. My guest today was Oleksiy Moskalenko from the Initiative Center of Come Back Alive, Povernys, zhyvym, one of Ukraine's most prominent charitable foundations. Let me remind you that you can support our work on Patreon. Your contributions are essential for us as we rely heavily on crowdfunding. You can also help fund our regular volunteer trips to frontline areas in Ukraine, where we support both civilians and soldiers. Donations here are welcome via PayPal. Thank you for listening. Stay with us and stand with Ukraine.